Coming up next on NewsDepth, as Ukrainian farms become battlefields, food prices soar. A creative group in Ukraine fights back through art. We meet an Ohio poet who made history with his verse. And U.S.-Russia tensions have reached outer space. NewsDepth is now. As the fighting continues in Eastern Europe, Ukraine appears to score major victories, while Russia repositions its troops. Hello, everybody. I'm Rick Jackson. Thank you for joining us. As Russia's conflict with Ukraine enters its 7th week, Ukrainians are cautiously optimistic about the withdrawal of Russian troops from Kyiv, Ukraine's capital city. Before fighting began, Kyiv was a modern city about the size of Chicago, with a population of about 3 million people. Many of those people have since fled as Russian troops have spent weeks attempting to seize the city from both sides of the Dnipro River. But Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, now says Russian troops are withdrawing from the city.
The withdrawal is slow but noticeable. Somewhere they are expelled with battles, somewhere they leave positions on their own.
The withdrawal comes after negotiations in which Russia pledged to scale back fighting in some parts of Ukraine. As a much larger country with a powerful military, many believed Russia would topple its smaller neighbor in a matter of days. But experts have said that Russian leader Vladimir Putin underestimated Ukraine's determination to fight off the Russian invaders. Although they've abandoned their efforts to capture the capital city, Russia has ramped up its attacks in the eastern and southern areas of the nation. Many of those areas are dominated by agriculture. Agriculture is really just a fancy word for farming, the art and science of cultivating the soil, growing crops, and raising livestock. Ukraine is home to Europe's most fertile soil and more than 100 million acres of farmland. It is the top producer of sunflower seeds in the world, and it produces so much wheat and barley it's nicknamed the breadbasket of Europe. But because of the war, this breadbasket isn't nearly as productive, and the ripple effects are being felt far beyond Ukraine's borders. Up next, Hala Garani tells us how the conflict in Ukraine is affecting the global food supply.
On this farm in western Ukraine, and many like it across this country, the future of food security for hundreds of millions of people around the world is being determined. 1/3 of the world's most fertile soil is in Ukraine, according to the UN. So what doesn't grow here, or what this country is unable to export because of the war, local officials tell me will cause ripple effects around the globe. The repercussions of the war in Ukraine began to impact everything, Volodymyr Romaniak tells me, including all agricultural operations inside and outside the country, including the sowing season. Western Ukraine, where this farm is located, accounts for a relatively small portion of total wheat and corn farmland. The most productive farms lie in the hottest conflict areas of the country, like Izium in eastern Ukraine. Satellite photos show the extent of the destruction in and around that city. And the Ukrainian agriculture minister tells me the impact on this year's crops will be devastating.
Last season, we have approximately totally 110 million tons. This year, we expect at least 30% less than this amount.
And so far this year, the minister says the country has lost almost $9 billion in agricultural revenue. Wheat is usually planted around March and harvested in the summer. But we are told on this farm near Lviv that most farmers in the conflict zone are writing this year off completely because it's simply too dangerous to work the land. This is already impacting food prices for everyone, but most acutely for people in vulnerable countries. In 2020, 80% of Lebanon's wheat imports came from Ukraine alone, 40% of Libya's. 30% of Egypt's wheat came from Ukraine last year, and now bakery prices there are jumping as high as 25%. On top of climate change and rising inequality, the Russian invasion will deepen poverty and increase instability thousands of miles from where missiles and shells are causing devastation. Back on the farm outside Lviv, we meet Pavlo Kovalchuk, who manages the fields and the other crops that grow here, like apple, plum, and walnut trees. Are you ready for the longer term? If this war lasts a long time, are you ready to dig in and keep working?
We have to be ready because we have no other choice. I and all other farmers who work with me here are ready because we are responsible for providing food, not only for Ukraine, but for other countries.
Beyond production issues, there is also a shortage of workers. Some have moved to safer areas or left the country altogether. Ukraine is known as the breadbasket of Europe. And so a war on this country is also an attack on all those who depend on it for food.
Thanks, Alla. Here in Ohio, we grow plenty of wheat, which is ground into flour for bread and other baked goods. In fact, the U.S. is actually one of the top exporters of wheat in the world. But even though we produce our own, the price of wheat is tied to the global market. This means we too will eventually feel the ripple effects of the global grain shortage. Now, one ripple effect from the Ukrainian conflict that we're already feeling, the price at the pump. Over the last few weeks, oil and gasoline prices have skyrocketed as the U.S. and other countries have refused to buy oil from Russia. But President Joe Biden made an historic move to drive down the cost. He authorized the release of a record amount of oil from the strategic petroleum reserves. Petroleum is a raw oil we get from drilling into the ground. It is the source of gasoline, kerosene, and other oils used for fuel. These strategic petroleum reserves is a U.S. government stockpile of 600 million barrels of petroleum stored in underground salt caverns in Louisiana and Texas. President Biden plans to take 1 million barrels of oil from the reserve per day for the next 6 months.
Our prices are rising because of Putin's action. There isn't enough supply. And the bottom line is, if we want lower gas prices, we need to have a more oil supply right now.
President Biden's referencing a concept known as supply and demand. The supply of oil and gas became smaller as the U.S. decided to cut out Russian oil. Meanwhile, the demand for oil has increased as people have begun to travel and drive more. So oil companies are able to charge more for the limited amount of fuel. By adding to the supply from the reserves, President Biden hopes to drive the cost down. As a reminder, the U.S. banned Russian oil as a way of punishing the country for its attacks on Ukraine. The ban, along with other sanctions, is designed to hurt the Russian economy. It's a way of fighting back without using weapons. And in Lviv, a group of determined Ukrainian artists are waging a battle of their own. Up next, John Berman takes us to the front lines of creativity.
War is everywhere in Ukraine, but so is art. In Lviv, art with a clear message. And here in the Lviv Municipal Arts Center, that art comes to life.
What do you want them to feel?
I want them to feel what we feel.
Which is?
Terrified, but honor, and that history is now.
History is now.
Yes.
Artist Mikhailo Skop is working on a series of anti-war posters, stickers, and cards, like this one.
This drawing you're working on here is of the Last Judgment.
Yes.
In those being judged, show me who's being judged here.
Here will be Putin, his soldiers, his generals.
Ukrainian judgment.
Yes.
It says.
It will be a judgment for Russian.
This is dark.
Yes. Do you see the background are full of black? Because we live in black times, in very dark, terrible times.
Mikhailo is just one of many artists working at this center, which has become a wartime hub for artists from all over the country. Their art is their own form of resistance.
Why is it important to show these messages?
Yeah, because Ukraine, this is not only culture, only war. This is also great culture. We can tell by our art that we can show different messages and different codes of Ukrainian nation.
That your culture survives.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you show me another one of your stickers?
Yes. What do you see here?
I see a bombed out building. I see people living their lives in the bombed out building without walls.
Yes, it's correct. It is a real building from Kharkiv. I saw the photo of this ruin.
This is almost the life that was inside.
Yes.
Almost the ghosts of the life that was destroyed.
It's a power of symbol.
Yeah.
This building wasn't built to be a ruin. No. It was made to be a home, a house for many people.
The power of a symbol, the power of art, with a message stronger than words.
Thanks, John. In the face of destruction, another Ukrainian artist found a way to express himself. Stepping out among the debris and rubble of his hometown of Kharkiv, cellist Denis Karatsetsev played a composition by Sebastian Bach. In a social media post, Karatsetsev praised his city's strength and called for help to rebuild it once the Russian invasion ends. And many people around the world are eager to help Ukraine as they watch the destruction and devastation from afar. In California, for instance, students are finding a way to support children who fled the war-torn country. Tara Campbell has that story.
From a simple hello to a carefully crafted heart, the students at St. Teresa's School in Oakland want the children of Ukraine to know they care.
In social studies, we see the news, and it's pretty sad.
Brianna Coyle and Sofia Cruz Hernandez leading the way to get these letters into the hands of children who have fled war.
Definitely makes me rethink about the things we have, and just helping them makes me feel a little bit better.
Teacher Chris Lynch came up with this idea as a way for his students to process some sadness and give some support.
Let's write to these students and say, we got your back, or we're with you. Somebody halfway around the world is thinking of you.
So if they read this, they know that someone is out there and they care and they love them.
I'm kind of just trying to be friendly and just have a conversation with them, just so they have someone to talk to and get their mind off what's happening right now.
I feel like it'll help them to realize that people care.
Are you hoping that they'll be able to write back?
Yeah. So I put questions like, what's your personality and what are some things that you like?
And word of these letters spread quickly throughout the school.
We started just in 7th grade. However, the rest of the school found out about it. So they're like, wait, we want to write letters too.
All 200 plus students, TK through 8th grade, they're all on board. Lucas Lee is in 4th grade and wants Ukrainian children to know it's safe in America.
Maybe they'll have a better life here in the U.S. And then once the war's over, they can go back to Ukraine, rebuild their house, and have a better life.
And they really feel empowered to be able to share their voice. They want to do something positive, and they feel like they have the ability to do so. And I think that we're really trying to grow future leaders.
As for these two young leaders, they're pretty proud of their school for getting behind Ukraine.
They can actually make a difference by writing a simple letter.
As we just saw, students in California decided to bring some joy to Ukrainian kids halfway around the world through letters. Now, we want to know, what would you write to a Ukrainian student? Let us know what you'd say to help brighten their day. Last week we asked, what's your most precious possession? I can't wait to see what you had to say. Let's open up our inbox. Molly from Marion Local starts us off with a possession that helps her remember a loved one. She writes, my most precious possession is my rosary that once belonged to my great-grandma. She passed away when I was only 3. At my first communion, my grandmother gave me the rosary. I keep it safe. I would be madder than mad, sadder than sad if it was gone. It is one of the only things I have left of my great-grandmother. Harrison from Evening Street Elementary also thought of a special communion gift. He says, my most precious possession is my compass. I got it for my first communion. My grandparents gave it to me, and it says, may your path always guide you. And I live by that. Jane from Parkside Elementary School tells us about a very practical possession she never leaves home without, writing, my most prized possession is probably my glasses. Without my glasses, I wouldn't be able to see. One time I broke my glasses and couldn't see, so I had to go to the nurse's office to go home. That is why it is my most prized possession. Melissa from Tollgate Middle School tells us about something cozy and meaningful. My most prized possession is the pillow I made when I was 8. The memories of when I made that pillow with my mom is something I couldn't leave behind. It has gone through many things and has a few rips, but it's still intact, and I wouldn't give it up. And Claire from Wilson Elementary School thought of something to help her express herself. My most precious possession is my journal. This is because I can write down all of my thoughts and feelings. It also helps me to stay organized. Well, thank you all for the thoughtful letters. They're all precious to us. Now, we turn to another kind of writing because April is National Poetry Month. Poetry is a form of writing that follows specific patterns, rhythms, structures, or rhymes to express ideas and feelings. And one of our country's most famous poets called Ohio home. Up next, Mary tells us all about a Dayton poet who made history with his verse in this week's No Ohio.
Roses are red, violets are blue, and I've got a great No Ohio for you. Okay, I'll admit, I'm no poet, but this guy I'm about to tell you about definitely is, and he used the medium to change opinions and break barriers. His name is Paul Laurence Dunbar, and he was born in Dayton, Ohio in 1872 to former slaves from Kentucky. Drawing from the stories his mother told him about plantation life, he began writing poems at age 6, and by age 14, his work was already published in a local newspaper. And as a student at Dayton Central High School, he teamed up with a friend and classmate you've probably heard of, Orville Wright, to publish the Dayton Tatler, a short-lived newspaper aimed at the black community in Dayton. After high school, without the finances to continue his education, Dunbar was forced to take a job as an elevator operator. But instead of giving up on his poetry, he worked at it even harder, using his meager salary to self-publish his first book of verse, Oak and Ivy, and he quickly earned back his investment by selling copies of his book personally, often to people riding on his elevator. This tenacity, combined with undeniable talent, caught the attention of both the literary community and black leaders. With the support, Dunbar got to work publishing a dozen books of poetry, along with novels, short stories, lyrics, and a play. Dunbar became the first African-American poet to earn national distinction. Dunbar's extraordinary life was cut short when he contracted tuberculosis and died at just 33 years old. But his work lives on. In fact, the title of Maya Angelou's acclaimed autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, is actually a line from a Dunbar poem. Paul Laurence Dunbar is buried in Woodland Cemetery in Dayton, along with his lifelong friend and early collaborator, Orville Wright.
Thanks, Mary. Now, throughout this episode, we've seen artists of all kinds expressing themselves, whether it be graphic artist in Ukraine or a poet from right here in Ohio. Now, for this week's poll, we were wondering, which art do you prefer to use to express yourself? You can choose between writing, like poetry, painting or drawing, music, or dance. And last week we asked, which branch of government do you think has the most power? And I think the founding fathers who designed the 3 branches of government would be very happy because the vast majority of you, 45%, said they seem pretty equal to me. That was followed by 29% who thought the president, who makes up the executive branch, has the most power. He is known as the commander-in-chief after all. 16% of you said the legislative branch or Congress. And lastly, just 10% of you said the judicial branch reigned supreme. And now I'm going to do something I don't think we've ever done this. I'm going to go all the way back to last week's poll results, because remember this, the results are for a question we asked you 2 weeks ago, and that was, which new emoji do you think you'd use the most? But do you notice anything kind of off? It's not an obvious mistake, but there is one in there, trust me, and we found it late. Here's a hint. When you look at percentages on a pie chart, they should always add up to 100. So let's do some quick math here. You'll see that 12 plus 30 plus another 30 plus 29. Hey, that's 101. So that means the labels on this pie chart aren't quite right. This likely happened because when our producers look at the poll results every week, the numbers actually look like this. Yeah, isn't that strange? Rather than integers, regular numbers, they have decimals, and we round up or round down the numbers to make a tidy little poll graphic every week for you. But here's the problem. Sometimes percentages rounded up or down don't always add up to a perfect 100. It's like the poll numbers played an April Fool's joke on us. Sometimes it takes a little extra math. In this case, the poll results should have looked more like this. That's right. So we are committed to accuracy in our reporting, especially when it comes to emojis. And we all regret the math error. Oh well. Okay, back to the news. The ongoing tensions between the United States and Russia have escalated all the way to outer space. The International Space Station, currently orbiting 254 miles from Earth, has been a shining symbol of cooperation between the United States and Russia for more than 23 years. But in recent weeks, Dmitry Rogozin, the head of Russia's space agency, has been making inflammatory posts on social media about the future of the ISS. When it comes to words, inflammatory means it's intended to cause anger or outrage. Rogozin's post appeared early last month, and it seemed to threaten that U.S. astronaut Mark Vande Hei would be stranded in space. Now, fortunately, the posts were nothing more than threats, and Vande Hei did safely touch down in Kazakhstan, as planned, right along with the Russian cosmonauts. That happened late last month. Vande Hei spent 355 days in space, breaking the previous record set by NASA astronaut Scott Kelly. NASA says it has a healthy relationship with Russian space officials and stays neutral on political issues. Well, speaking of NASA, it seems the space agency's been working overtime lately, announcing many exciting new discoveries from the far reaches of space. Up next, Natalia Garcia takes us through some of the latest news that's coming from out of this world.
While Earth's volcanoes were spewing lava, scientists say Pluto had much cooler volcanic eruptions. I'm Natalia Garcia, and this is your Space News Roundup. A new study reveals that the dwarf planet has giant ice volcanoes that were active as recently as 100 to 200 million years ago. The discovery was made during NASA's New Horizons mission. Researchers point to a region of Pluto largely made of bumpy water ice and filled with volcanic domes. One volcano is similar in volume to one of Earth's biggest volcanoes, Mauna Loa in Hawaii. They believe when Pluto's volcanoes erupted, a cold mixture of ice and water flowed out like toothpaste into the planet's surface. On the other end of the temperature spectrum, we head to the sun. From our vantage point here on Earth, it might seem like the entire sun is equally bright. But actually, when NASA scientists looked very closely at the sun using a special space probe, they saw that some areas are darker than others. And sometimes there are even bursts of brightness. These are known as solar flares, and they're one of our solar system's largest explosive events. NASA reports a massive solar flare erupted from the sun last week. More powerful sun flares can pose dangers to satellites, power lines, and even astronauts in space. Our last piece of news comes to us from the past, 12.9 billion years in the past to be exact. This is what the newly discovered star called Earendel looked like the first billion years of the universe after the Big Bang. If we compare the universe to a human, this would have been back when it was just a kid, around 5 or 7 years old. Why is this particular star so impressive? Because it's the most distant individual star we have ever seen. Earendel is 50 times the mass of our sun and millions of times as bright, also making it one of the most massive stars we know.
Thanks, Natalia. I had no idea there were ice volcanoes. Well, back here on Earth, long way from Pluto, people from all walks of life were inspired by the Olympic Games earlier this year. The Olympic motto is faster, higher, stronger, and it motivates athletes and spectators to do the best they can. Well, students at Gates Mills Elementary School used their Olympic spirit to excel in their classrooms, their school, and their community. They used the time during the Winter Olympics to stage their own school-wide Olympics. Each classroom in the kindergarten through 5th grade chose a country that represented themselves, or they made up their own country in some cases. The 1st grade class decided they were best represented as Doglandia, while the 4th grade decided they were the Hogwarts. Other countries that were chosen, well, you probably know these: Japan, Brazil, the United States, and Greece. The games kicked off with an opening ceremony, and during the opening ceremony, each class presented their country to the rest of the school and explained why that country best represented their class. I wonder if Team Doglandia students are loyal and like to play outside. The opening ceremony even had a torch relay and a cauldron that was lit to signify the start of the games. Don't worry though, it wasn't a real fire. After the games got started, each class worked on 5 different goals, each of which was represented by the 5 Olympic rings. The blue Olympic ring represented reading. Each class had to reach their own reading goals during the Olympics, and if they did, they got to fill in their ring. I bet I know what books Team Hogwarts read. Well, the black ring represented school pride. To earn that ring, students had to show pride in their work and their school. The red ring was for math, the yellow ring for kindness. To earn the yellow ring, yep, you guessed it, students had to show kindness to their peers and the faculty and the staff at the school. The green ring, that one's for sportsmanship. If a class was able to fill all 5 of their rings, they got a prize. Well, this is better than a gold medal. They got pizza. When we met with the teachers, they told us they were very proud of how the students came together and helped each other reach their goals. They said it was a great opportunity for the students to think about things that they normally wouldn't, and most importantly, it gave them a chance to celebrate each other and all the hard work they've done so far this year. At the closing ceremonies, the teachers competed in some adjusted Winter Olympic sports that included curling, skeleton, and bobsled. We've told you about those in previous episodes. This week's A+ award then goes to the students at Gates Mills Elementary School for using the Olympic spirit to come together as a community and to support each other. So kids, keep up the great work. Now to a gold medal feline who's always got her paws on a news story. Let's see what newscats dragged in this week's petting zoo. Okay, nap time is over, cat. Get those paws a-typing. Newscat's actually feeling pretty patriotic after hearing about the school-wide Olympics in Gates Mills. She found a story featuring our national symbol, the bald eagle. To find out how rescue crews gave a bald eaglet a helping hand, click the Petting Zoo button on our website. And thank you, Newscat. Now, before I sign off, quick announcement. We're going on spring break. Bye. No, okay, not yet. The next episode of NewsDepth won't post online until the 21st of April. So while we're away, you have lots of time to write us. And yes, there are plenty of ways to stay in touch. You can send a letter. We're standing right here at 1375 Euclid Avenue. That's in Cleveland, Ohio. Our zip code is 44115. You can email us, newsdepth@ideastream.org, or you can tweet us. Our handle is @NewsDepthOhio. All one word there. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rick Jackson. We'll see you right back here after the break.
NewsDepth is made possible by a grant from the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation.